The morning light spilled through the wide glass windows of the Maple Street Cafe, painting the wooden floor in long, golden stripes. It was one of those Tuesdays when the world seemed to have collectively decided to ease its pace. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries lingered in the air, and somewhere in the back, a child's soft giggle was quickly hushed. Ethan sat at the long wooden bench by the window, his two children nestled beside him. His younger daughter, Mila, immediately plopped onto his lap, her curly head resting against his chest as though it were the safest spot in the world. Maybe for her it was. His older son, Noah, sat to Ethan's right, chin propped on his folded arms, watching the street outside with that thoughtful seriousness his mother had passed down. Ethan noticed it sometimes, that expression, and it tugged at his chest in a way he had learned to carry quietly. He ordered 2 hot chocolates and a black coffee, stirring his slowly without truly tasting it. 14 months had passed since the divorce was finalized. 14 months of school runs, grocery trips, and bedtime stories told in a voice that tried hard to sound steady. He was doing his best. Everyone kept telling him that, and most days he believed it. But some mornings, like this one, he simply sat with his children in the warm cafe and let himself breathe. That was when the door opened. She entered carefully, as people do when carrying something fragile, though what she cradled was herself. Sonia was young, perhaps 26 or 27, with blonde hair loosely tied back and a blue shirt that had seen better days. Black forearm crutches supported her, wrapping around her elbows for stability. Beneath her left knee, a dark mechanical limb met the floor with quiet precision as she moved. She didn't rush. She moved like someone who had made peace with being seen, not because she sought attention, but because there was no other choice. She scanned the room for a seat. The cafe wasn't crowded, but the layout made it tricky for someone with crutches. Narrow gaps between chairs, a step near the counter she'd avoided by entering through the side door, and the few available seats tucked in corners or beside occupied tables. She paused near Ethan's table. Space at the far end of the bench beside Noah was open. Stood there, crutches steady, glancing at the spot, then at Ethan. Her eyes were light brown, cautious in a way that suggested she'd learned to ask without demanding too much. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Can I sit here?" Ethan looked up from his coffee, then at the space beside Noah, then back at her. He didn't answer at once. Something flickered across his face, thought, hesitation. Mila turned, peering at the woman with wide, innocent curiosity. Then Ethan said, "Wait a second." He gently shifted Mila off his lap and stood. He placed his coffee cup and Noah's hot chocolate on the table. He nodded to Noah, who straightened immediately, understanding without words. Together, quietly and without fanfare, they rearranged. Ethan slid the bench slightly away from the table, creating more room. He moved his bag from the bench's edge and pulled a nearby chair free, clearing a path wide enough for crutches, wide enough for someone needing extra space. Then he offered, "Take as much room as you need." It was a small adjustment of wood and air, but Sonia stood still, her expression shifting subtly, not surprise, but something quieter, like a carefully built wall cracking just enough to let warmth in. Her eyes filled. She blinked, looked away toward the window, then back at him, smiling a smile that carried weight. "Thank you," she said, and he knew she meant it in the way people do when words are all they have left. She settled onto the bench slowly, crutches resting against the wall, her small bag on the table. She exhaled, a release of tension as if she'd been holding herself upright for years and finally could rest. Mila watched with big eyes, then leaned toward Ethan and whispered something that was almost a question. "Daddy, she has a special leg." Ethan opened his mouth, but Sonia spoke first. "I do," she said gently to Mila. "It helps me walk." Mila considered this seriously. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore," Sonia replied. "It did for a while, but now it's just part of me." Mila nodded, satisfied, and leaned back against Ethan, returning to her hot chocolate. The tension in the air melted into something ordinary and warm. Ethan apologized softly. "Sorry, she asks a lot of questions." "No," Sonia said. "It's fine. Kids ask the real ones. I don't mind." They sat in quiet companionship. Sonia ordered tea, wrapping her hands around the cup as if drawing warmth from it. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. Noah watched it go, then returned to drawing shapes on his cup's condensation. Eventually, Ethan asked, "Do you live around here, Ms. Ryan?" I just moved to the neighborhood, Sonia said, 3 weeks ago, still figuring out which places are easy to get into. She said it matter-of-factly without bitterness. This one's pretty good, actually. Wide door, no steps. I never thought about that, Ethan said. Most people don't, she replied. Until they have to. No accusation lingered in her voice, just the quiet truth of it spoken gently like something she'd made peace with. She'd lost her leg 4 years ago. She didn't share the whole story and he didn't press. She mentioned an accident, a long recovery, the particular grief of losing a part of yourself without warning. She spoke of learning to walk again, not as triumph but as something more complex, a negotiation, a relearning of the world from a different angle. Some days it feels normal, she said. Some days I wake up and reach for something that isn't there anymore and I have to remember all over again. Ethan was silent. Then, I think I understand that, not the same way, but I know what it's like to reach for something that used to be there. She studied him. He looked at his coffee. No explanation followed and she didn't ask. Yet something passed between them in that silence. A recognition, the kind that needs no words. Noah, who'd been listening all along, looked up. My mom moved away last year. Sonia met his gaze gently. That must have been hard. Noah shrugged, the way boys do when something is too heavy to name. It's okay, he said, and Ethan, hearing his son, felt something loosen in his chest, a tightness he'd carried too long. Yeah, he murmured, we are. They lingered longer than planned. Mila eventually dozed against Ethan's arm, her hot chocolate half empty. Noah showed Sonia his drawings, small animals, cars, a lopsided rocket, and she praised it as the best rocket she'd ever seen on a cafe table, making him laugh for the first time. She spoke of her job writing for small publications, working on a piece about urban design and who gets left out. Her eyes brightened as she talked and Ethan listened, not out of politeness but because she made ordinary things sound worth hearing. When it was time to leave, Ethan gathered Mila gently. Noah packed his things with quiet efficiency. Sonia reached for her crutches and Noah handed them to her without being asked. She held them a moment, then looked at him. You're a good kid. He turned red, staring at his shoes. Thanks, he mumbled. At the door, Ethan held it open. Sonia passed through, pausing to turn back. Thank you, she said, but this time it felt fuller. For moving the chair, she added, and for talking to me like a person. He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words settle in him. They exchanged numbers in the hesitant way adults do when they're not sure what they're asking for, but neither wanted the moment to fade. Perhaps they'd meet again at the cafe. Maybe a message would come, maybe nothing would come of it, and maybe something would. Life rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly, often through a door you're not watching, in an ordinary blue shirt, asking the simplest question, can I sit here? Ethan walked home with Mila asleep on his shoulder and Noah strolling beside him. He thought about how a small thing, a moved chair, extra space, honest minutes of being seen, could mean so much to someone else. He realized people often needed to be met where they were. Not fixed, not pitied, not turned into a lesson, but simply welcomed, given room. It was true for Sonia, navigating a world not built for her. For Noah, learning to carry weight without hardening. For Mila, still young enough to ask without flinching. And for himself, still learning that being okay didn't mean pretending nothing hurt. It meant making space anyway, for others, for his children, for himself. Sometimes the smallest gestures held the largest meanings. Sometimes offering someone a seat on a bench could, without intention, give them something they hadn't felt in years. And sometimes, without expectation, they'd return the favor, not with grand gestures or noise, but with the quiet reminder that kindness endures, that connection remains possible, that an ordinary Tuesday in a cafe on Maple Street could still surprise you with its warmth.